What's going on, everyone? Biggest chess event of the year, Olympiad, is here, taking place in Budapest, Hungary. In case you are not familiar with the context, Chess Olympiad is held once every 2 years and is by far the highest participation event in the chess world, with 380 national teams of 5 players for almost 200 countries, right, competing in an 11 round tournament played over 4 boards, so 4 versus 4. All right, I'll be creating a lot of content related to this tournament over the next 2 weeks that I'm excited to share with you. Specifically today, this is the second video that I'm recording, so I kind of record for me. Give video a thumbs up, subscribe if you have not already, if you appreciate this dedication. And without further ado, let's jump into today's topic, which is about brilliances. The previous video I made about the upsets of the round 1, or almost upsets. This is going to be about example games. All right, I have 2 games prepared to show you. Without further ado, let's get to the first one. First game here we have was played between Johan-Sebastian Christiansen and Jun Lee from South Korea. Now, Sebastian actually is at the moment second highest rated player from Norway after Magnus Carlsen. I actually remember Johan since he was a kid. We played a Groningen tournament together, I believe it was 2012, and I remember his mom asking me questions basically about improvement and so on. So it is wild to see passage of time, and now he is close to crossing 2700 mark. Mind blowing, right? Well, let's see his game. He starts with e4, c5. We have ourselves Sicilian defense, knight f3, d6, d4, going for an open Sicilian here. C takes d4, knight takes d4, knight goes to f6, knight c3, a6, and we have ourselves Najdorf Sicilian. Bishop to g5, main line and probably most critical if white is trying to play for the opening advantage. Knight bd7. Now the e6 is the main move here. However, knight bd7 has becoming very popular recently, last few years. I would say there are few ideas in delaying this e6. Maybe they don't play e6 at all and go with g6. There are also other ideas, I believe, with queen c7 or queen a5. So I'm not an expert of a Najdorf, so I am gonna refrain from giving my expert opinion. Let's see how the game continued. Bishop to c4, e6, and queen e2, extracting the king on the e file here. b5, kicking the bishop away, standard idea also for black. Now bishop goes to b3. One thing I want to mention here is white here has taken quite some time on their opening moves, so this kind of gives me an idea that maybe they were not prepared to play Najdorf. I'm not sure, because Johan is an opening expert, so-called. So I'm surprised actually he taken that much time. So apparently the most time was spent on bishop b3. Maybe he was considering sacrificing on e6, which actually computer likes. Knight takes e6, and queen can't go to e7 because there is knight c7. So queen has to go either b6 or a5. If queen b6, then either long castle here, or maybe immediately knight d5 also works. I'm assuming same thing would be the case on queen a5, like long castle here. And white has 2 pawns for a sacrifice picks, but king is gonna remain stuck in the center here. Knight e5, bishop takes f6 apparently, bishop e6 takes, there is queen h5 check. All right, this line gets pretty wild here, and somehow it is only 0.3 for white. That is mind-blowing to me. All right, now bishop e6 sacrifice in general is a pretty standard idea, I would say, especially when knight is blocking the bishop here, but it is more common when bishop is already on b7. So I guess that played a role in white's decision making here. He plays bishop back to b3, black plays queen to c7, developing the queen. long castle b4, poking that knight on c3. And what does white do? Where does that knight go? Well, say no more. Knight to d5. I believe this is called Velimirovich sacrifice. Do not quote me on that, but that's how I know it. Now the idea is to open up the e5, right, at any cost. Now moving the queen would be really bad. Here, let's say queen b7, because let's say takes on f6, take there, and queen h5 with a lot of pressure here on this e6 pawn, all right? If you defend, I don't think, how do you even defend? Maybe queen e7, but oof, bishop a4 check. That is going to be tragic here, and you would have to give up bishop c6. That's actually a pretty cool line, right? So on knight d5, we have first brilliancy of the game. Black is pretty much forced to capture back e d5, e takes d5. Now king is in trouble, so bishop e7, rook d to e1. This move was a little interesting to me. Why not rook h to e1, or another very attractive option I believe here for white would be knight going to c6, right? Activating the knight, renewing the threat on this e7 bishop. So apparently computer says knight goes to e5, take on e5, then go d6, bishop takes d6, bishop takes f6, g takes f6, queen f3, hitting the rook, and f6 pawn. Black is not going to be able to defend both of them. Now, obviously, giving up the rook is not fun, but if black gives up the f6 pawn, then the bishop and the rook will both be hanging. So that's also no bueno. All right, so black apparently would have to give up that rook with the short castle. Queen takes a8, bishop to b7, queen a7, bishop c5, trapping the queen, or almost trapping. Rook d7, queen d7, queen takes c5. All right, and somehow we are on equal waters. What a line this is. Somehow apparently we end up with 0-0s, equality. Okay, so back to the game position. What white plays here is rook d to e1. I'm actually quite curious what was the thinking process between rook d to e1. Now black here does not play the critical move, which would be knight to e5, blocking this e file, f4, knight to g6, and apparently black is keeping the advantage here, and black still 1 hour and 28 minutes, oh boy, versus 28 minutes. That's a 1 hour advantage on the clock. Very strange. Why would black play short castle that fast here? Bishop f6, g takes f6. All right, this position is not so clear. Computer gives -1 to black, basically ready to run the king away. Let's say if g for short castle, and there is no f5 because knight e5. If h4, then bishop moves away. h5, well, yeah, this is not hanging because queen f3 and knight is getting trapped. Knight moves back. Black is very cramped and king is open, but piece is a piece. All right, so rook d to e1. Apparently black plays short castle. I would also be very curious to see what was the thinking process. Why did black reject knight e5 there? But they played short castle, gave the bishop on e7, and from here on position gets really fun. Maybe it was because they thought that rook e8 and the resulting position was in black's favor, but now white sacrifices the queen. Queen e8, knight takes e8, rook takes e8, knight to f8. So technically, on the paper, white only has rook and one minor piece for a queen. Okay? Queen is better than rook and the minor piece. However, white pieces are very active, right? After white brings the second rook into the game here, these both rooks are putting a lot of pressure on the black's position. Knight is ready to jump on f5 or e5, f5 or c6, I mean, and then e7. This bishop is ready to get in from e7. So black will have a very difficult time here unfolding their position. Bishop to b7, rook takes a8, bishop takes a8, rook goes to e8. So the one rook was traded, but now the second one lands there. h6, kicking the bishop away. And here we have a very beautiful move. Knight to e6. I believe bishop retreating or bishop e7 should also be winning, but knight e6 is really classy, attacking the queen, attacking the rook, and if you take on e6, d takes e6, and now this bishop comes back to the life with devastating force. e7 next is going to be unstoppable, and then taking on f8 with checkmate to come, right, and promoting to a new queen. So black decides they didn't want to have any of that. Rook takes f8, king h7. Now this is the final phase of the game, which I thought was very nice. Bishop goes to c4, king goes to g6, bishop d3 check. So white wants to get this bishop into the game, right? And if you take there, then bishop d3 check, g6, bishop f6 is gonna be a mate, because g pawn is pinned and king is gonna be unable to escape this mating net. The only move is, I guess, queen g7, but alright, that just loses the queen. And then the bishop also on a8. So fe is not a possibility here. King has to get on the run. Bishop d3 check, king h5. Now a very interesting occasion here. All right, in the game, white played bishop e2. Computer says that this is mate in 5. Okay, and the line that it gives is exactly what was played in the game. Funny enough, right? Bishop e2 check, king g6, bishop d3 back, then king returns to h5, and after repeating this twice, then white goes h3, threatening g4. Now, if black takes on g5, rook h8 is an immediate checkmate. Black plays f takes e6 now. If g4, then g5, bishop is hanging, right? So what does white do? Because if bishop moves away, then it's gonna give king the h4 square. So what does white do? Well, the final touch, f4. A very nice move, defending the bishop, renewing the threat of g4, and if black does take on g5, rook h8 is going to be a checkmate. Very funny mate, and aesthetically pleasing, I would say. Now, another funny accident, or what I found funny at least, was computers saying this was mate in 5. All right, and if I make move h3, then it goes down to mate in 2 now. All right, so some kind of glitch on chess.com engine part. Okay, takes there and f4. This is basically the exact same position that happened in the game, but it would be 2 moves earlier. Fun, right? Very nice game by Johan-Sebastian Christiansen. Now, let's see game 2 that I wanted to show you. That was played by my countrymen, or should I call country women, Lela Javakhishvili. And well, my last name is Javakhadze. Her last name is Javakhishvili. Little different, but still similar first 6 letters, I believe. So d4, knight f6, knight f3, e6, bishop to f4. We have London system on the board. By the way, Georgia was playing United Arab Emirates in this match, and I believe we won 4-0. Bishop f4, d5, e3, c5, pretty standard London system position. After knight c6 here, c3, and black immediately goes for queen b6, attacking this b2 pawn. Lela decides not to trade queens. What I mean by that is queen b3 is also a standard way to counter this queen b6 in London positions, but Lela says, I want to keep queens on the board. Simply defends the b2 pawn with the rook, bishop e7, bishop to d3, short castle, and now this is the decision time for white. Does white go short castle, or does white play h3 to give a breathing space to this bishop in case it gets attacked, something like knight h5 there. Also a very standard idea. Well, Lela chooses a very fun continuation, h4. All right, mixing those ideas basically, and also setting up an eye on a very tricky, or I would say not even tricky, this is just straight up courageous, setting up an eye on the h file sacrifices. All right, knight g5, and then if h file opens up, this rook will come into the game with a lot of firepower. Right, so black plays rook to e8, knight goes to e5. So this knight heads towards e5. Now black decides to trade central pawns, cd, ed, and then trade that knight as well. How does white capture on e5? Well, obviously with d pawn to kick this knight away from defending the h7 square. And suddenly all these ideas of opening up the h file becomes very relevant. Knight retreats to d7. Here comes the queen to h5, threatening the checkmate. Knight defends the h7 square. Knight to f3. Now knight is headed towards g5. Now if black tries to block this diagonal with g6, then simply queen h6 and next h5, opening up h file should decide the game. So black player does not play g6, plays bishop d7 and allows a very unique Greek gift sacrifice, I gotta say. Usually we do not see sacrifice on h7 when knight is defending that pawn. All right, I'm not even sure, honestly, this would be called Greek gift sacrifice. All right, but either way, bishop takes h7, brilliancy, knight takes h7, knight simply goes to g5 now, attacking the knight on h7 and also attacking the f7 square. So for that reason, if knight moves back, that's going to be a very nice mate actually. Queen f7, king h8, and white simply plays h5, next threatening to play h6, and the game is over. There is nothing else black can do. Computer is actually suggesting queen f2, sacrificing the queen. That's how hopeless black's position is here. All right, so that is actually what happened in the game. I was reviewing the line here, but before I show that, I wanted to say that bishop g5, h takes g5. That is also a trouble because black is gonna lose that knight on h7. If something like bishop b7, that is apparently the only way to save here. But I believe g6 here, bishop g5, and king has to get on the run, and black will lose a lot of material to not get mated. All right. So what happened in the game was knight f8 takes on f7 and h5. Not minding here sacrifices, simply threatening to go h6 on the next move. Bishop b5, h6. Black apparently played g6 and allowed this very aesthetic queen g7 checkmate. All right, those were the quick two games that I wanted to show you. I hope you enjoyed. Do let me know in the comments, and I will see you in tomorrow's recap. Let's have wonderful round 2. I'll see you there.